friends, and welcome to this bonus episode of Booked. I'm delighted to introduce you to Raging Rich and Tia Shelano from the Middle Age Bodcast. Thank you so much for joining me, guys. Welcome.
Thank you very much.
Yeah, thank you for having us.
Oh, it's a pleasure. Honestly, this is the first time that I've interviewed two people at once, which is really cool. We have just finished recording the episode where you guys interviewed me for the Middle Age Podcast. That was very fun. It was a lot more fun than I expected because I was like, I don't know what questions you're going to ask me. And I was worried. And I was like, what if I make a fool of myself? Successfully I did, so that's good. And that episode will have come out before this one, so hopefully if you haven't listened to that, stop this episode, go and listen to the Middle Age Podcast, and then come and listen to this one. That's the correct order to do this in. The reason that we're at this point right now with the three of us having this conversation is that TA, you and I have worked together to essentially put together your author feature for the website Indiosyncrasy.com. And through this, we've realised that it's not a one-person job marketing a book and putting things together, and your lovely friend Raging Rich has been a part of your journey as well, and so we sort of discussed it, and as well as doing an episode with just you, we're doing this episode so we can kind of talk about creativity on a few different levels. Firstly, the Doctor's Hidden Patience. I already have said this in your episode, your solo episode, but I fucking loved it. It was excellent. I really, really enjoyed it. It's not at all what I thought it was going to be like, but we can discuss that in greater detail later. So how did you guys end up working on this together in any capacity?
Well, I mean, as far as the Doctor's Hidden Patience is concerned, well, I'll start. I've known Rich since 2001. I think that's fair.
Like
so we've known each other a long
now,
time. So obviously, we're sort of close personal friends for a long time.
Mm-hmm.
As far as the Doctor's Hidden Patience is concerned, the actual writing of the book, I kind of started, I guess, a bit before COVID, went through the sort of various drafting processes and all the rest of it. And now my IT skills are not so strong as the man sat next to me, shall we say. And Rich has been obviously heavily involved in helping me with sort of the design side of the front cover and getting all of it ready in terms of getting the books able to be printed and all that sort of stuff, and a lot of the technical side of the website that I've got, shelanobooks.co.uk. Shameless self-plug. But yeah, so Rich has been massively influential in those processes, because I do affectionately refer to him as the king of IT, and anybody who gets to see the book, whether it's in paperback or ebook, will note there's an acknowledgement to Rich for his masterful skills in there. He's laughing now. What does he want to say about that?
No, I still find it very funny when you call me the king of IT, because I'm really not.
But the best of it is that is now in print. So
it's official
copies, official copy. There are copies of the Doctor's Hidden Patience in circulation, where although they don't obviously know you, he's referenced that you are the king of IT. So if you say something often enough, then it becomes true.
Absolutely. And has anyone disputed it other than you?
Just me.
Then you're the undisputed king of IT, Rich. I'm sorry to tell you.
He's basically Bill Gates without the money.
Oh, that's nice.
I like the money as well.
Oh, that's funny.
So that's kind of been the thing, hasn't it? I think for us, as far as the book is concerned. So the writing side of the book was very much something I dedicated to a lot. So say particularly during COVID, and then various editing and processes since. Obviously, which we've talked about in the other episode. But yeah, so yeah, Rich has just really been very obviously helpful and supportive as a secondary person there, kind of helping me with those processes and trying to obviously take it forward. And obviously you two have the same thing in common, that you both interviewed me for a podcast episode on the Doctor's Hidden Patience, as our second ever episode of the podcast was that. So Rich was there kind of interviewing me about it and stuff like that as well, which is again part of the joint endeavour of the Middle Age Podcast.
That's awesome. So, I mean, we'll go on to the different forms that this has taken, but you guys seem to be able to collaborate pretty well. Like, there are lots of, I can see that there are like gaps that either of you have that you kind of complement each other. You're a very, very good creative couple. And you've got a lot of sort of history with creating things together. In terms of the, developing the website and doing the front cover, Rich, how was it working with TA? Was he a diva?
Oh, 100%. No, I was cool, right? Yeah, so actually it wasn't too bad. So I've worked in websites for a long time. I've actually worked in websites for like 25 years.
Oh, wow.
Doing sort of web development originally and sort of moving through that career path. So in terms of building the website, there were some new things, like I've never built a site that could sell books or anything like that. But I used to have websites of my own, so just personal things that I liked or projects that I was working on and things like that. In terms of the book cover, I've never really done print graphic design, and I'm more sort of web graphics and things like that. I've done a lot of that sort of stuff before, but no, it was a really good process actually, and we did find we were kind of on the same page, didn't we, quite quickly with ideas that TA would mention something and I'd kind of try and then make it a reality, and we collaborated really well with that. I think that the cover, as in the front cover, was quite a very simple process because it was a case of, okay, we've got a design in mind and something that could quite easily be manipulated to fit onto other platforms and things like that and other media. It was more when you got into the, now we need a spine and a back cover and all these other bits and stitch them all together and all of that kind of stuff was very interesting. But yeah, it was more when it got to the launch of the website when it kind of became, is this going to actually happen? Is this going to work?
I think just going back to the thanks for calling me a diva, but I think we'd go back to the to the cover. Particularly, it was Rich's idea. I think around, you may have noticed that the hidden word is almost then hidden within the font. So that was one of Rich's ideas about the take on the hidden patients and having that as the thing. So it was a really interesting idea. And then in terms of that whole putting it together to have it, printed as a book, it was sort of Rich who helped basically get all that set up in terms of them being sent to a printers for the first sort of batch of copies, and it went through first time with them what he'd done in terms of getting all the sizing and everything together, including. So again, we talked about the whole King of IT thing, but it's like that would have been something I would have found much more challenging to. I'd probably still be sending them copies now, trying to get it through of 100 times of is this okay, but it went through sort of first time. And I understand what he means about the website. I did get a little bit, is this going to happen? Is this going to work? You're just getting that little bit of anxiety, and
yeah, of course.
Yeah, he sometimes feels like you become putting too much pressure on. You have to be very careful that, as Rich said to me recently, that we don't become Lennon and McCartney, and that we stay, as for the British reference, we remain as Ant and Dec.
I'm absolutely Ant and Dec vibes from you guys. I would have also thought maybe Dick and Dom.
Oh god,
Dick and Dom as well. Shout out for the Brits. I love Dick and Dom. I'm just saying, I think you guys are great. I mean, it is really, really hard going back to the getting it right first time for print. So TA, you decided to purchase like physical copies of the book very early on in this sort of process, and a lot of people don't have the sort of ability to be able to do that. That's quite a big jump for you in terms of confidence wise. It's also incredibly hard to get print ready art good the first time. So my husband is a graphic designer and printer, so I hear stories every day about, they said that this was ready and it wasn't, and it's not come out the right colours. So yeah, I mean, props to you, Rich, for getting it done, because it's not easy. Honestly, it's not.
I mean, the interesting thing with the printers on that point, you obviously had the cover side of things where, obviously Rich was able to do all of that. I mean, one of the things that we sort of used in terms of the typesetting for the book itself, I mean, I think we can say on here is we've been on, was it the site Readsy?
Yeah.
And they'd got sort of templates there for being able to put your your manuscript in and do that formatting, which again was the other side of that, which worked really well, I found. So then having the two things together when it went through, from a printing point of view, was fine. I mean, in terms of the hardest part, I think around the some of the elements of it is finding somebody to, when you're independent type person, somebody to print at a cost that's viable, was an interesting challenge. And strangely, I struggled to find anyone local to us actually that could make it viable.
Interesting.
Weirdly, ended up having it printed, of all places, in North London.
Really? In London?
Yeah. Was the cheap, ended up being the cheapest I could get it for. And actually a place like printers more close to where we are, I couldn't make it work, the viability of the pricing at all. Whereas I was able to, and again, am I able to mention them? Clockbookprint.co.uk is who it was. And so I was doing online research, etc. Their site was really, really helpful in terms of going through. You can pick and choose different options. It'll give you the different sort of pricing. And I ended up purchasing 50 copies as a starting point. Was the, Rich and I had spoke about that, what is a reasonable amount that you could, again, the financial viability of price per copy and how many do you think, well, actually 50 is seems a reasonable number as a starting point. And that's what I did with them. And I think it took about 3 weeks from my order until they arrived, and
that's
gone from there. And then I'm now virtually through the second batch I'd had printed. I've only got a relatively small number of those, so I had a second 50 printed. In addition to obviously been available on other sites, but of those copies I had printed. So yeah, that's it's been really, really great in that sense. I've become sort of Mr. Sales, just trying to everybody I speak to. I was actually out last night, and I was just talking to somebody, and they went, "Really?" And they're like, "I'd buy a copy." They're like, "Would you?" And they're like, "Yeah, can you get one on the way home?" Yeah, I've got one at home. Yeah, and literally like that. So it's just really random when you talk to people. It's that whole thing around telling people what you're doing and whatnot. It's amazing how many people go, "Oh, I'm really interested in that," or "I know somebody who'd read something like that potentially." That's been an interesting, on the word of mouth side of things, the more in person things. I mean, I know we've talked about the online challenges of promotion, but the in person stuff is always a bit of fun.
I've just had a really good marketing idea for you. I'm thinking trench coat. I'm thinking trench coat with big pockets full of books. Like, in the films where they're like, oh, they open the trench coat and it's full of drugs. That, but books. And then if people are like, would you? I'd love to buy a copy. You could just be like, wipe open your trench coat. Which copy would you like? I'll sign it right now. And then they can't say no, because they can't say no to a man in a trench coat full of books.
I look like the least literature dealer as well. I mean, I know this isn't a visual, but you're not going. People probably wouldn't look at me and go, "I bet he's dealing in books."
That's why it's the surprise factor, because people are going to be so taken aback by the whole situation that they're just going to hand over their money. Just give it one weekend near Christmas when people are panicking to buy presents for people last minute. Just walk around the shops, be like, "I've got books for sale. Open in your trench coat." Genius. I don't see how that could go wrong. Just make sure you're wearing something underneath.
Make sure something is definitely hidden. If the doctor's hidden, no, let's not go with that. But actually pitch up outside a bookstore with my own stand and just sort of stop people from going into the bookstore and go, "Don't need to go in there. Got it here. It's all here."
Yeah. Pick a big bookstore.
WH Smith in our hometown.
See? Where people are going in for their stamps, just be like, "Hey, bit of that. pointing to. I realise that this isn't going to have a video, and I'm holding up my arm and pointing to under my arm as if people can hear that happening. Just imagine a man in a trench coat full of books, and then pointing at the books.
I like the idea of doing that and sort of going, you can't get these in that shop, and somebody sort of going, there's probably a reason for that. No, read it, make your own mind up.
Are you going to let Big Book tell you what to buy? I mean, it's one of those things about, as you mentioned, like doing things in person is so much easier than trying to get people's attention online, because there's so much noise, and if it doesn't catch your attention within a couple of seconds, then you're just going to scroll past it anyway. So by being able to connect with people in real life and actually talk to them, I think that's kind of been the basis of me creating this platform and this podcast and the website, is that the beauty of having essentially a small business, because that's what you are when you write and you sell a book, or you're creating a podcast and you're trying to get people to listen to it, or whatever that creative endeavor is, you're a small business, and you do business well by essentially connecting with people on a more personal level. So my hopes are that people will listen to this or listen to your podcast and look at the website and go, wow, that's a real human being, and they care enough about their really precious like piece of heart and soul that's on this piece of paper that they want to share it with me, and that feels really nice. And I think there's something really deeply personal about reading somebody's book that you don't get from necessarily like a traditionally published book, unless that person is very active and, you know, do a lot of their own in-person marketing. But yeah, I think it's really cool that you have the physical copies of the book that you can actually give to people, and that's something that is not easily achievable in a lot of areas and for a lot of people, because it can be so expensive. Like sometimes it's more than you would be able to sell the book for.
So I think that was in terms of what I was saying around the when I was doing the costings for different printers, is exactly that. So when I was dealing with a local company, thinking they might be able to do it at a reasonable price, what they quoted me, absolutely, I could never have made.
Yeah,
I could never have covered my own costs. Mm-hmm. The great thing about what I've been able to do is what I've been able to purchase those books for, and then what I've been selling them for. You're not making huge sums of money, obviously, but it has allowed me actually to cover the costs of those books and provide a small sort of turnover profit on that. That's I think that's great, and the quality of the books as well, I know, is the thing that people have said has been really good. So that's why I've been really so impressed with in dealing with that particular company. Also, the fact that they treated you like you were a real publisher, almost, in terms of, it wasn't, you're a small time, we'll treat they sort of like seemed to value that. And I think that was something that really stuck with me, that it was like, that was really, really nice, and made you feel like you're obviously a very small time kind of doing this book and whatnot, but then there you got these copies, and then I've had people asking me to sign copies of books and stuff.
That's so nice.
It's really odd.
Is it an ego stroke, or are you like, no, it's weird?
It is. I suppose it is a little bit. And I'll tell you why. So last night, when I said about this guy buying my book, we'd gone to a talk by some retired sports people who were doing a talk at a local place. And we bought tickets for this event, and it was basically the father of a friend of my brother's who bought the book. So we were chatting and whatnot. So he actually at the event bought books from these sort of sports people, and they'd sign them. And then of course he ends up buying mine, and then on the way home pick up a copy, and I'm signing that. So suddenly that makes me feel like I'm like them in a way. Obviously I'm not, but it's that weird moment of I went to a talk for World Book Day by Miranda Dickinson, who's a very heavy selling author, and she signed copies of books for me, and this was before the book came out, and we were talking about it and stuff. And so it's like she signed for me, and then suddenly I've been signing for other people. Now it doesn't really matter that you're not a massive author, you've still had that, and there are now copies of that scattered around houses. That's such a weird thing, I think. I mean, Rich, I know, was reading it electronically on his bus journey. He'll tell you more, I suppose, about that.
Yeah, so I was actually granted an early copy where I did get to read along, and I read it very quickly as well. I think it was within like 2 days I'd read it all on my bus journeys because I was just so engrossed in it, and it has been a really interesting to see the journey that TA has been on with it, because he mentioned the thing about signing the books, but you never know where things are going to go. You never know the kind of audience that you can build and things like that. And it's important to have that kind of, even though, yes, there's a lot of people that have bought it that are friends or acquaintances. There's a lot of people that aren't as well. And so it is an interesting thing, and it adds that personal touch to things. And I think it has been a real testament as well, the effort that's gone into the book as well, because I think we've never really touched upon it in many ways. The sort of how long, when we've been doing obviously the Middle Age Podcast, our podcast, we've never really touched on how much effort has truly gone into putting this book together. It has been something that I remember when you first mentioned it, and it was a few years ago that it was mentioned, and now to actually see it out there and have a copy of it, because I did actually purchase a physical copy after I've actually was given a preview copy and then bought 2 copies, one digital and one physical properly.
That's so nice. Aww.
But yeah, it's been really interesting seeing how it's gone, and obviously the fact that there's going to be hopefully some more content coming out. I think that it's a real testament to the effort that's gone into it, but also the reward of the people that have been buying it. And as TA said, yes, there's people that he knows one way or another, but there's a lot of people that he doesn't know that's bought it as well, and it's been brilliant sort of seeing that happening.
That's so cool. I mean, it seems like you guys are a really good team. And I know that before we started recording, we kind of talked about the different creative endeavours that you have both been involved in. So talking of the Middle Age Podcast, so this is something you started this year. And you've done quite a lot of episodes so far. So how have you found working together in that capacity? Because it's that's a whole different kettle of fish, right?
Who's going first on this one?
Go on. Because I can tell the running gag.
Okay.
Go on, please.
It's been a really interesting thing to do, in terms of it is almost become like it's a form of work, but it's not a form of work, and then it's obviously with someone that you know well. But the interesting thing has been certainly the ones where we spoke to guests and we've interviewed various people. That's been, I think, really fascinating, actually, being able to have conversations with people that you wouldn't really have. Even people, if you may know them, you wouldn't have that conversation that way. And the way we've kind of structured it is down the research bits to a degree with the guests and writing the questions around it. So you're structuring what you're doing. And I think we've then found people have come back and said things like, actually, you guys go really well doing that. We've had people say, I think they think Rich has got a great radio voice. That's been said by a few people, that he's got the opposite tone to his name of Raging Rich. He's got this sort of soft tone that comes through on the episodes that people find really nice, easy listening. Then having kind of those interactions with the guests where we're kind of bouncing off the guests, and then a little bit in terms of our own sort of working with somebody that I think you've kind of been able to do that. So that's for the most part. We haven't sort of massively argued. I mean, we've joked during season 2 that we're now on that I asked for a better chair for the recording, that Rich had me sat in a not particularly comfortable chair. And I said it was part of the joke was it was part of my season 2 contract. This isn't what you were going to.
No, this isn't.
It's extra stuff. Excellent.
Season 2 contract. And I finally, now, for episode that we'd just done, he bought a new chair for himself. And so I got his old chair, which is still a better chair than I was treated to. So that became this joke around these working conditions are not to my liking. As part of my season 2 contract, I am expecting a better chair. So we've kind of had those sort of jokes about it as well. And then the whole thing around with the king of IT and on the editing side. But I'll be interested in what Rich says about working with me after calling me a diva earlier.
I'll take. I called you a diva.
Oh, you got me the diva.
I merely confirmed. But no, it has been really good. It kind of started as the whole thing about a podcast actually started as a bit of a joke. I'd thought about for a while, it'd be really good to do a podcast and kind of raise the idea with you, hadn't I? And you'd mentioned it to me, kind of more in the process of the book, just doing something with the book maybe, and we kind of said, well, we need something that's probably going to be a bit more about us in a way, and we're both in our early 40s, starting to find it's getting a little bit more difficult to do certain things. It's like you get tired a lot more easily, you start to ache a bit more as you're sort of walking around, even doing tasks like the plant botany, as you put it, from when you were doing your garden and stuff. And so yeah, we kind of came up with this concept, and we were trying to think in names. I mean, originally the plan, one of the ideas I had was, well, we should do something about like films and TV shows, and how would we rewrite them and things like that, and all this kind of stuff. And then it came down to this, and TA came up with the name, the Middle-Aged Bodcast. We were trying to find all these other names, and everything was taken that we came up with. So yeah, we came up with that. But the sort of the running gag that I was going to say was, when we do have a little bit of a disagreement, or if there's a lot of editing and I'm under pressure, and he knows now what I'm going to say, but I'll go, I've had enough, I'm not doing it anymore. And TA will turn around and say, you can't quit your own podcast.
This is it. It's when he becomes that diva point of, why are you pressing me about this editing for this episode? So we did a guest episode the other week where the guest was obviously asking about having a copy in advance. And Rich, by his own admission, was a bit late on editing that one. And so I was then sort of, asking him, and he's like, leave me alone, I'm trying to get it done. And you just have that kind of moment of where we have that, if that's the closest to kind of like work. And I just go, okay, we'll just sort of, we'll just leave him to it, we'll just back away a little bit. But I mean, as far as the actual podcast is concerned, I mean, we've really gone all over the place a little bit, I suppose, in some respects as well, which has been quite interesting, where we have talked about, the book, and then we've talked about health and well-being and fitness. I mean, we've interviewed now people around mental health, physical health. We've interviewed other podcasters. Obviously we've interviewed yourself again, chatting about, what you're doing. So it's been really interesting to then have that as well as something where, you get to talk to these people, and it's been really interesting. I think the other thing is as well is, in terms of the podcast, it's almost a law now that you've got to have a podcast, because there's about 50 million podcasts now. So, if you're not doing a podcast, there's clearly something wrong with you. So,
or you don't have the confidence or the equipment.
This is the new wave of therapy. We're all doing podcasts, is what we're doing. Yeah. Therapists are going to go out of business, because it's all going to be either the people doing them or people listening to the people doing them becomes a form of therapy.
No, wait. Actually, I don't think they're going to go out of business. It's going to become... Okay, so previously on the episode of the Middle Age Podcast that we just finished recording, this is going out way, way later, we mentioned the book marketers that slide into your DMs. It's going to be therapists sliding into the DMs of the podcasters going, hun, you sounded rough. Are you all right? They're going to be fishing for... there's going to be a new wave of therapists, because everyone's dumping all their brain stuff out there for comedy, and they're going to go, oh dear, that's some trauma. Let's deal with that. But I don't want to deal with my trauma, because I'll have no material. So don't slide into my DMs, therapists. So, I mean, when I listened to the first episode of the podcast, I thought it was going to lean more towards just, middle-aged people and their struggles with their health and things like that. But it really has transformed into so much more. And it's very common with newer podcasts, is that the first episode goes, we're going to do this thing. And that's never the case. That's never going to be the way that it turns out, because you'll find things that work and you'll find guests that are interesting. And that makes for a better episode than just trying to cram it into this format. And you've also been able to talk to a greater range of people and just get the human perspective on a lot of stuff, which is really great, because that's not what we get from a lot of the larger podcasts out there. It's actual real people with their real things, just trying to make it happen, or trying to get by, or just trying to manage day-to-day life. And I think for me that's far more interesting, because you don't get to see that insight. And when people are relaxed and they're having a laugh and they're, it's a conversational thing, like this and like your podcast, I just think it's more comfortable. You can have it on in the background, or you can really listen to it on your way to work, or when you're cleaning, you can have it like they're keeping you company. And that's kind of the beauty of having so many podcasts. I think the other thing is the success of yours has no bearing on the success of other people's, other than the fact that if you like a podcast, you might also like this one. It's the same with books. Other people's success doesn't mean that your success isn't going to happen. It means that if you're in that sort of stratosphere and you're kind of like in that positivity circle, it sounds a bit wanky, but when you're all kind of like bouncing off each other and having a nice time, people want to get involved in that, whether it's like listening to it or reading it, whatever. So the fact that you guys have a good relationship and you can laugh and joke and be like, oh, well, this is a struggle we had, but we worked through it and we can laugh about it now. It's so, so human, and people want to hear that. So I think I love that you found each other. It's nice. It's a beautiful thing.
Way of I think on the point about the stories, though, that's the bit as well that's interesting when you talk to people, that the celebrity thing that people obviously latch onto a lot, as we all do for various reasons. But for want of a better phrase, normal people have great stories too.
Yeah.
Is what you find. I mean, we've interviewed people, and when you actually listen to their stories, they're absolutely fascinating. And some of the things people have done in terms of personal accomplishment, or things they've done to support or help other people and things like that is incredible. And they're not always the stories that you would get to hear. And I often, joked with certain people that we've interviewed of like, you the sort of star guest or whatever, this week. But actually, when you listen, sometimes you're like, they really were really good and much better than they thought they were going to be. And that's not something they probably ever thought they'd do. So I think that's one of the things that we've taken from it. And it's actually having that opportunity to get people into like saying, to a relaxed point where you can draw that out of guests as well in interviews. It's quite doing one of the things I've quite enjoyed about it. And when I've listened back to the edits that when Rich has done them, it's interesting how that went there with that particular guest or that question, or how that fed off there. It's interesting then what other people then take from that sometimes.
Yeah, and it's a growing situation as well. Like, what it's going to look like in 2 years' time is going to be completely different to how it looks now, and you'll have different equipment, or you'll have a different logo, or you'll think, okay, well, this is the formula that works, so we're just going to keep doing that until people get bored of it and we'll do something else. So I think as long as you're open to personal development, which it seems like you guys are, because you're kind of going with the flow, and although you still have your structure and you take it very seriously. Something that I did want to mention is I know that you've already done an episode of the podcast about this, is I know you guys wrote a short film, and I'd love to talk about that. I desperately want to talk about that, in fact, because I know you guys have known each other, did you say, since 2001?
Yeah.
So was this one of the first creative things that you guys did together?
Yeah, so it all kind of started because I discovered Kevin Smith. I didn't actually discover him in that. I didn't go, this is Kevin Smith.
So we have you to thank.
But I discovered his presence. I found out about him, and I started watching his movies, and I just found it really, really good. It's a great faux pas there, isn't it?
I love that.
I found I started watching some of his movies, so absolutely love Mallrats, for example, which was the film that didn't do so well, but seems to have found a really good audience. And Really liked his style of kind of things. But also at the same time, we discovered the British version of The Office.
Yes.
So the Ricky Gervais version of The Office.
Mm-hmm.
And then that was sort of the thing that we both really liked, wasn't it? The Office.
Mm-hmm.
More so than the Kevin Smith movies, because they feature lots of superhero references that TA just does not really enjoy, because he's got no taste in that sort of side of things. But
Nobody's perfect. It's okay.
But it kind of. So I don't know if it was as big in the US, but in the UK we had X Factor, and obviously with X Factor, they would do so they had like different categories for everything. So there's the boys, the girls, the over 25s, and the groups. And at this point, the groups were never that sort of big. That they tended to be a bit of a joke act in some respects. Until you got to sort of the eras of your One Directions and your Little Mixes and that kind of stuff. But it was the year Leona Lewis won it. And I'd obviously then as well been watching these Kevin Smith movies and learning about how films could be made and things like that, and structure of writing scripts. And so I knew it was something I wanted to give a try, but I was a little unsure. Certainly about doing the comedy side of things, like writing a bit of structure. I kind of thought, yeah, I can do that kind of thing. But I knew that TA is a lot more quick-witted than I am, and better with the comedy side of things. And so sort of spoke about it, and that kind of started it, really, wasn't it?
Yeah, you're kind of, I suppose, in a British reference sort of interesting way here. You kind of were Elton John trying to find Bernie Taupin, I suppose, is the line that we're sort of going with here. But yeah, just bringing it back from how you've sort of bemoaned my lack of superhero film aficionado status. But I think it is also the collaboration point, isn't it, around the writing a book thing is difficult when you do something individually. When you're doing a collaboration, you do, as you say, like the podcast or writing a film, you bring out different elements and bring different things, to it. So I think that's where we sort of sat down and started to go through bits and pieces. And you find you've got a similar sense of humour and whatnot as well to things. And you become looking at that through the lens of what was happening a little bit and how we looked at that. So it was interesting. And then we just never really, I don't know, we kind of, I suppose, procrastinated around it a little bit. We came back to it and didn't. And I think there was a point in the episode of the podcast where we talk about it. There was almost an element of a regret that even if we had just used the most basic camera equipment to have done something and you'd still have something there as that you'd done it. And the podcast has been an example of that, where it evolves as the episodes go on, but you can still go back and listen and think, well, okay, that's how it's moved forward. We would have had that. And I think there's that element where we're like kind of revisiting it now and looking at it in sort of in the modern time as well. And yeah, there's an element of that. And that we could, perhaps that was a bit of a preamble then to the podcast, that we could work together. The podcast has sort of taken that in a different way, but yeah.
And I suppose to just sort of, because we haven't really said what the project was at any point, but the idea was that it was based on Britain's biggest girl band. So the idea was there's this girl band that was the biggest act in the UK, had like big selling album and tours and all that sort of stuff, and then they split up, and their manager finds that everything's gone south. He needs some money and he wants to get all of his success back. So he decides he's going to try and reunite this group, and he goes on a bit of a mission to get them back together, to go for the Christmas #1, which is not so much now, but it used to be the big thing in Britain, having the Christmas #1. And so, yeah, that was sort of the concept of the film, really.
And, it has kind of got to the point where there is now a version of that that's been created by others in America, and obviously for absolute legal reasons here for you and us, we are in no way, shape, or form suggesting that there's been any reference
thievery,
or review of our work that's contributed to that. But what we did find
Mhm.
when we watched the program Girls Five Ever
Mhm.
is it was a very similar kind of concept to what we'd been looking at, albeit ours
Interesting.
was very much through the British lens, I guess.
Mhm.
But that's been really interesting watching that, and it probably gave us an element of, do you know what, we were actually, maybe we had not a bad idea. If
Mhm.
somebody's been able to, who's obviously in terms of Meredith Scardino as this sort of well established writer, with some great work, has done that. And you go, well, actually, our idea wasn't that bad. When I'm not saying our writing, the quality of our writing, is up for debate.
Mhm.
But, in terms of, okay, so we did have a creative idea that could work because it is working in its own way.
Mhm.
And so then when you do go and do something like a book or a podcast, okay, so you can, I think it's that point, isn't it, around giving something a go.
Mhm.
And some people will like what you do and some people won't, but it's definitely that sort of reflection that I actually found it. We talked about it. I found it quite motivating in some respects that there was then something there, but then we
Yeah.
both watched it and went, "Oh, it's such a shame we didn't do it." In some respects, even though we'd never have got it to that point in terms
Yeah.
of, no one's going to be, probably putting us on Netflix, but or other channels. But even if we'd just done that kind of and had that reference back, that point in time, that would have been something we could have, I suppose, looked back at more so than just being able to read it.
Mhm.
Yeah, I guess that's my thoughts on it.
So, do you think you'll ever do anything else with it, like turn it into a book or send it off to Netflix and see if they take it?
So, Meredith, if you're listening, and of course you are, because this is the world's biggest podcast, and
It will.
Indiosyncrasy is going to take over the
Mhm.
world. It is. I'm telling you, Jeff Bezos is getting scared.
Yeah, quaking in his yachts.
He's-
I don't think he's worried about me.
But I think that there is a point around, would we love to see a British version of that?
Mm.
I think possibly. In terms of from a more small time point of view, we have talked about revisiting it as part of the
Mhm.
podcast, what that might look like, how
Mhm.
how we might revisit, obviously do some editing around it and redrafting, and what would we then do with it, is definitely something we're possibly thinking about going forward. But we haven't at this point been so busy with the other projects. That's not
Yeah.
something we've really got into, but
Mm.
probably something we'll think about.
I can so see kids from the 80s and 90s jumping on that and loving it, especially if it's got like a Spice World vibe. I feel like that would appeal to a lot of people that love Clueless and films like that. But I mean, think about it. You talked about you mentioned the British Office, which, by the way, is absolutely excellent. Massive Ricky Gervais fan. They did an American version. They did an American version of Shameless. So why can't we do a British version of Girls Five Ever? You never know.
It's interesting though because the British versions of American sitcoms seem to do really badly.
Yeah.
Because there was, I think there was an attempt at that 70s show. I can't remember what they called it. That didn't really work, and there was a few sort of things like that. But I suppose there are British ones that don't do well going the other way, like the In-Betweeners and stuff. But
There
yeah,
was an American version of The In-Betweeners.
yeah, it's basically all the jokes from the British version.
They're
Just
not
doesn't
going to
have
get
that.
that. They're not going to get that. I speak to my in-laws and they're like, okay, I know they haven't heard me or heard what I've said. They don't know what I'm saying. That's so funny.
They've tried
I'm
to
not
do
going to
an
watch
American.
that.
They've tried to do an American Gavin and Stacey. They've tried to do a few things like that, and it just didn't work.
No.
I suppose it depends what it is as well.
Yeah.
So the
Yeah.
Office obviously worked both ways,
Mm-hmm.
and I can see why that would in terms of the context of the program. There are
Mm-hmm.
other things that didn't, but sometimes it may be due to the success of the originals as well.
Yeah.
Sometimes, because I
Yeah.
think the one that immediately jumps out at me is the Married with Children, which was obviously the American one.
Oh, yeah.
With,
Mm-hmm.
I can't think of the actor's name who plays
Ed
Al
O'Neill.
Bundy. Ed O'Neill, thank you, from who's
Mm-hmm.
also in Modern Family, which is another
Mm-hmm.
fabulous sitcom. But that they tried to do a British version of that here, and
Mm-hmm.
that was an absolute flop. And British people didn't like, they much preferred the American version. It very much depends upon what it is. I think the
Yeah.
key difference probably would be, and from what we've seen of Girls Five Ever, is that ours would have been very much the British take.
Yeah.
So I suppose it would have been much more for the British audience, perhaps, whereas, maybe The Girls Five Ever feels much more towards
For the American
market,
yeah.
was my take on it. So, yeah. Meredith, give us a call.
She's definitely still listening to this. Still listening to this episode. She's in it for the long haul.
The problem is, if you mentioned it earlier, but if Meredith Scardino slipped into our DMs, we may think it is somebody doing fake scam marketing services, and we could ignore. It could be the care that we'd have to take on that.
Okay, we need to give her a safe word, like a password. What should we do?
The problem is, if we do that now here, they'll know what.
Oh yeah, you're right. Okay. Okay, we'll figure out a code, and we'll get back to her on it.
Oh dear.
No, I think it's excellent that you guys are able to bond in so many sort of creative levels, because not only have you both worked on the marketing for The Doctor's Hidden Patients, you've also looked at we've also talked about the short film. I don't know why I was struggling with that word. And also you work on the podcast very frequently as well. I just think it's so nice that you are both able to work with each other and not have disagreements so severe that you can't possibly work with each other again, because I don't think I could work as a team very easily. I'm a bit of a control freak, and I'm like, if it's not done like that, it's not that it's wrong, I just have a really hard time compromising. Is that ever something that comes into play with anything that you guys work together on, like compromising on how things are going to end up looking?
I think so. I think we've always found a good happy medium on things. I think we have occasionally both been guilty of going a bit not above our station so much, but dreaming a bit too big.
TA's like, what?
Well, we can tell the story now, because this has actually happened. A friend of ours got married a couple of years ago, and we were asked to do a joint speech for our friends when they got married. And that at one point was going to have a smoke machine and a video screen and us doing dance routines and all kinds of stuff that kind of, and it was kind of, keep it simple. We can't go too over the top. But there was at one point a few ideas for that.
It's interesting that you mentioned that, because I was wondering where he was going with that particular anecdote. But in terms of that, when we wrote the speech for that wedding, that as a collaboration point actually was really interesting, because you're then having that bounce off around how you knew, the bride and the groom and the different stories and the anecdotes, and then bringing that together. And there was a point where when we went through it, and I remember Rich said, it just feels a little bit, there's just too much joviality a little bit, and actually it's missing some of that balance, that sort of sentimental balance, particularly, that would make it so much better. So then we sort of end up sort of tweaking the end and how we did that, and that was so much better. So again, it's being able to work with people as well, where you go, yeah, I see where you're coming from on that. So it's that I think we're always open to what the other person's ideas, and we'll chat things through and have that kind of balance around something, rather than if you do become for want of the better phrase, the complete diva of, well, if it's it's not the way we want, I want it, then we're not, we don't have that kind of thing. We kind of would talk through ideas and balance things out and sort of and judge it. We don't sort of go, oh, I completely hate that, or it's like, well, actually, why do you think that? And sort of almost more like a democratic version to it. But I think you've got to get on with somebody quite well to do that sometimes. And whatnot.
I mean, it sounds like you guys both have a very clear mutual respect for each other, both as people and as creatives as well. And that's kind of the key, is like whatever situation you're in, whether you're friendly with that person or not, is if you don't have a respect for that person, it's going to be difficult for you to collaborate and have something polished and actually enjoy working together.
I think the thing you mentioned to us actually was that you said about being a good team. And I think that's the interesting thing as well sometimes, is that if you look at what you can do, in terms of individually versus then working with other people as well and bringing something together. I don't think that either of us individually doing a podcast would, I don't know, I just don't see how that would work. I don't think either of us would make that work. I think that's okay for some people can make that. Obviously you're doing what you're doing, but obviously I suppose it's focused very much on be interviewing the guests, and you're kind of the sort of linchpin of that. And what we've been doing, I think it works well having two people working and balancing, and then when you do have guests and whatnot, and how you kind of make that conversation. Whereas if we try to do that individually, I'm not sure how that would actually play out as well. So it's recognizing that, like you say, it's recognizing that. And as you talk about respect for skills, I mean, King of IT, it's written undisputed King of IT. Indeed, it's written in print. So
it's official.
It's official. I wouldn't say it's in a large number of printed books.
It's more printed books than I've got. So well done. You're officially the best at that in this call.
So yeah, I think that is the interesting thing about how you do that and make that work. I'm hoping at this point, of course, by the time this episode goes out, that we haven't had a complete falling out and the season 3 contracts are in the courts, because they're really, really bad.
We'll put a disclaimer. Or like a weird trigger warning, like, I'm sorry, this is in light of the breakup of T.A. Shelano and Raging Rich. It feels like you guys are meant to be, and I really hope that you stay together forever. BFFs.
It would be a shame. Like we've been mates for a really long time. And I think that's been the thing that's really helped us being friends for like 23 years. As we said, it has helped. But the sort of the collaboration side of things has been. We've always had good sort of feedback from people when we've worked together on things like that speech and things like that. So it is good to get that feedback. And as TA said, we do get some really good responses from people about the podcast, and we're really enjoying that. So yeah, it has been a lot of fun. As much as I moan about the editing process at times, it has been a lot of fun doing it.
That's a labour of love, isn't it? Because you wouldn't do it. You wouldn't do it unless you really wanted to do it. And it's okay to complain about stuff. Like, everything can't be happy clappy all the time. And if it wasn't hard work, then it wouldn't be worth doing. That's my opinion. But there you go.
He keeps telling me to teach me how to edit, so he can take away some of his.
I can have a week off.
Have a week off. Yeah.
Do you know what? It's not that hard, but it's just annoying.
Yeah.
Because it's just little bits like when I've been editing these, believe it or not, even with the finished product, people probably won't believe me. Thankfully these have like 2 separate audio tracks, as that does with yours, I believe. I've had to keep going to where I laugh and turning the volume down. It's so loud, and I don't realise, and I just go like really loud into the microphone. I don't realise I'm doing it, and I go a lot, because I learned to give verbal nods to people so that they know that I'm listening or like with them at the time, and it's so annoying to listen to, and I didn't realise, so I have to keep like cutting that out, because I'm like and I'm sure people think that I'm doing something strange in the background because it doesn't sound like a verbal nod in the recording. Well, this has been a lot of fun. It's been an hour or so of calling you guys divas and loving your BFF energy and talking about creativity and working as a team. So honestly, it's been such a pleasure having you guys on. Thank you to Raging Rich and T.A. Shelano for being my guests today. And don't forget to check out the Middle Age Bodcast. If you could tell our listeners where to find you guys and where to find the podcast as well, so they can give it a listen.
Yes, so we do have a website, middleagedpodcast.co.uk, and you can find the podcast on Spotify, Apple, Amazon, and a few other platforms. We're on YouTube and a couple of other platforms, but those are sort of the main ones. Just search for the Middle Aged Podcast.
Great. And I will put the links in the description of this episode. So once again, thank you both so much for your time, and I really appreciate it. And yeah, hopefully we'll cross paths again.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.